Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another Mini 5 Pro video. In today's video, I'll be walking you through the best settings possible for your brand new Mini 5 Pro. I'm going to make sure that you get the absolute best quality out of this drone. And on top of that, I'm also going to make sure that you get those really smooth cinematic shots that you want for your footage. And if you apply all these tips and tricks I'm going to give you, I guarantee you that you will 100% level up your drone flying.
All right, let's start at the top and work our way down. First up is white balance. Shooting with the white balance set to auto is probably one of the worst things you can do, as it will change the temperature mid-shot and this will ruin your footage. Now, an easy way to set the white balance is just fly your drone up into the sky, select auto white balance, then switch it off again. This will give you a very good idea of where it should be. Next up, we're gonna set our resolution to max, which is 4K. Now for the frame rates, most people will claim that you should shoot in 24 or 25 frames per second, but that advice applies more for handheld cameras. For drone footage, I have found that shooting with those frame rates causes the drone footage to stutter or lag a bit. You won't get that smooth motion when flying. Therefore, I advise you to shoot in 30 frames per second instead. This will get rid of that stuttering while still keeping that nice natural film look. Next to that, we have our color profile. If you want the absolute best quality out of your drone footage, you need to shoot in D-Log-M and you need to learn a little bit of color grading to get the max out of your new 1-inch sensor. If this is new to you, it can seem a bit overwhelming and complicated at first, but it doesn't have to be, and I have a full video covering this in the simplest way, explaining all the steps. On top of that, I'm gonna make an own dedicated video just for the Mini 5 Pro. Also make sure you enable color display assist when shooting in D-Log-M as well, so you can see accurate colors on your screen instead of the flat grey image. Okay, next up we're gonna set our shutter speed, and we're going to stick to something called the 180-degree shutter rule to get a natural motion blur for our footage. And in order to achieve this, we need to set our shutter speed to double the frame rates. So because we are shooting in 30 frames per second, we're gonna set our shutter speed to 1/60. Now, once you have applied these settings, you will often find yourself in situations where your footage is going to be very overexposed a lot of the times when flying in daylight. This is where sunglasses comes into play, or in other words, ND filters. ND filters is a must-have to get the right exposure while keeping our preferred settings when flying a drone. When you buy ND filters, you will get different strengths on them. So make sure to put on the filter that brings the exposure meter down to the right as close to 0 as possible. Now, this exposure meter can sometimes be a bit misleading depending on the scene. So in order to make sure you actually get the correct exposure, go into the menu, open the camera section, then scroll down and turn on overexposure warning. This will show zebra stripes in the areas that are too bright. Then just lower the exposure until you see the stripes disappear from the sky to avoid blowing out the highlights. I also recommend turning on the grid right below the exposure warning. It's a great composition tool that helps you frame your shots better and get a more professional look. Try placing your subject along the lines or intersections for a more balanced composition. Now for the ISO, you want to keep this as low as possible to get the cleanest image. As soon as you increase the ISO, you will start introducing noise in darker areas, which makes your footage not look as clean. But if it's too dark outside and you're not using any ND filters, you have no other option than to increase the ISO to get the right exposure. Alright, now let's get you the best quality slow motion. If we head into the slow motion settings, this drone offers 4K 120 frames per second and 1080p 240 frames per second for super slow motion. But the image quality from these modes isn't great. Now for the absolute best results, and what I highly recommend, is shooting in 4K 60 frames per second in the regular video settings and then slowing that down to 40% in your editing software. This is usually slow enough for most situations, and the quality difference between 4K 120 and 4K 60 is huge. The only trade-off is that you need to slow it down in post instead of getting instant slow motion straight out of camera. Alright, a quick note for photography: if you just want ready to use images without editing, regular JPEG is fine. But if you want the most flexibility and detail, you need to shoot in RAW. It preserves far more information for editing. Now you can also choose RAW plus JPEG to have both options. Now for the aspect ratio, set this to 4:3 if you want the full sensor and flexibility to crop for social media, square or vertical. And choose 16:9 only if you're going for a widescreen look like YouTube thumbnails or Facebook covers. Finally, set the resolution to 50 megapixels for the most detailed images, letting you crop heavily in post without losing that much quality. Alright, so next up, we are going to change our button placement for the brand new gimbal roll that came with the Mini 5 Pro because it's too complicated as it is. So head over to control and scroll down until you see button customization, tap it and scroll down. We're going to switch places with the zoom wheel. I rarely use the zoom wheel anyway due to loss of quality, so tap gimbal roll, head over to camera and select zoom in out. Then scroll up and do the same thing with the right dial zoom in out, tap it, head over to control and select gimbal roll. Now you have a much easier setup. Alright, so now for this last and most important section, we're gonna make sure you get those smooth controlled cinematic shots. Head into the menu and over to control, scroll down and select gain and Expo tuning. Make sure Cine mode is selected. First up is max angular velocity. This will adjust how fast the drone rotates left or right. I recommend to set this around 20 degrees a second for a more controlled cinematic movement. Next up is yaw smoothness. This settings helps soften your rotations, easing into and out of pans smoothly. I recommend keeping this somewhere around 20. Now the brake sensitivity controls how quickly the drone comes to a stop after you let go of the stick. So set this to around 100 for a more graceful stop instead of a jarring brake. Next up, we have the Expo settings. These settings changes how sensitive the sticks are. Lower the values makes your movement smoother and more gradual, and higher the values makes the drone react too suddenly, which looks jerky. So I always keep my Expo values extremely low for maximum control. Alright, so next up we have max control speed for the gimbal tilt. Now this limits how fast your gimbal tilts up and down. I keep this at 10 degrees a second to avoid those fast aggressive tilts. Next to that we have tilt smoothness. This determines how gently the gimbal stops tilting after you let go of the wheel. I like to max this out to get that smooth glide in and glide out effect, because you don't want your camera to slam to a stop mid-shot. Now for the new Infinity gimbal, the same apply here, so for roll smoothness, a lower number makes it so that the Infinity gimbal stops rotating instantly when you let go of the wheel. So set the roll smoothness to 20 and the same with max roll speed, set this to 5 degrees a second for a more balanced natural speed. Now keep in mind that these are the settings I use and that I prefer, so I highly recommend that you actually go outside and just play with these settings yourself, but using my settings can be a good starting point for you. I'll leave my settings down into the description if you want to copy them.
If you found this video helpful, I would appreciate it if you could smash that like and subscribe button before you head off. Thanks again for watching and I'll see you guys in my next video. Fly safe.